Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating young woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Hi, Gertrude. My name's Valerie Ellis, and I'm based in the UK. I'm on the west side of Greater London, and I'm very excited to have been referred to as a young woman, actually, because I'm actually in my early 50s. So apparently all my vanity and skincare is paying off over the years to have been referred to as a young woman. And I'm an artist. I do abstract and conceptual art. Well, my parents emigrated from the UK to Australia, and I was born there. So I have Australian citizenship by virtue of being born there, and English citizenship because I had English parents. And I was taken back to the UK as a child to grow up there. So I start out with a sort of base in Australia and a base in the UK in my mind and in my experience as a child. My experience in the UK was not a happy one. So my parents and my family were quite negative, unhappy, problem-focused people who weren't very supportive, kind, uplifting people in the way that parenting is understood that it should be now. And so at about 17, I ran away from home in the UK and back to Australia. And it was in Australia that someone gave me a book called The Road Less Traveled, and it introduced me to the concept of psychology. I'd never heard of that before. This was decades ago, before people like Oprah Winfrey and Tony Robbins really popularized psychology and personal development. So I was given this book, The Road Less Traveled, and I read it, and it was like I had been walking through my life with my eyes shut, and the book made me open my eyes, like literally peeled back my eyelids. And all of a sudden I could see things I had never seen before. I'd been working on out of the programming that I'd been given as a child and was very unhappy as a consequence. And I was so inspired by the book and the insights that it gave me into psychology that I decided that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do psychology because it had really liberated me and I understood the power of it. So I went back to school and I did night school. I got a test score that allowed me to get into university, and I entered the University of Queensland doing a degree in psychology. That lasted for 4 years. I had ended up with an honours degree in psychology, and I left and went into, first of all, working for Queensland Corrective Services, which people would more colloquially know as the Prison and Probation Service. And I was a probation and parole officer. And because I was very young, I was very optimistic and excited about curing everybody and rescuing everybody. So I had a great time with prisoners and probationers, being in court and that kind of thing, thinking I could rescue everybody from their childhood struggles and as I had experienced through psychology. Then I went into private practice, and I mostly worked in the western suburbs of Brisbane. I know you're in Melbourne, Gertrude. I lived in Brisbane and I dealt with what I call middle class people with middle class problems mostly. So people going through divorce and then going past that into dating and repartnering and parenting issues, sometimes more serious things like sexual abuse people had experienced as children, but mostly sort of pretty mundane, run-of-the-mill, kind of what I call middle class people's problems. And I did that for 20 years. I was a therapist for 20 years, and I felt a lot of fulfillment from that. I let go of my own personal development in that time. I was very focused on my clients. And so towards the end of that, I realized I'd sort of ignored my own personal growth and reflected back on who I was and what I found most fulfilling and where I was at in my life and how I wanted my future to be. I'm sure people listening have probably come to that moment in their life where enough of their life has gone past where they realize that there's only so much left for the future. And you start to reflect on, well, if I've done this so far in my life, what do I want to do with what's left of my life? And I knew that I hadn't always felt like I felt at home in Australia. So I was thinking about going back to the UK. And I knew that the reason I'd done psychology was really as a reaction to my experience as a child, to my suffering. And that if I'd had the kind of childhood that I should have had, that I would have wanted for myself, I wouldn't have been a therapist. In fact, what I would have been was an artist. When I did art at school, I finished up getting the highest mark in the country that year for art. So I was very talented as an artist. But because I was so unhappy, my unhappiness took priority over my talent. My artistic talent, although it was really obvious to people around me, didn't register for me. What registered most for me was the suffering and unhappiness, loneliness, and feeling of unloved that I felt. And I went out into the world pursuing that. And that was my journey to Australia. And I'd gotten to the point after 20 or 30 years where I thought, you know what, I'm cool with myself now. I do love myself. I know I'm valuable. I've fixed what I could and helped other people along the way. But now I want to live the life that I could have lived or should have lived or would like to live if I'd had a better start in life. And I knew that that was art. So 3 years ago, I moved back to the UK and began a career as an artist. So since then, I established a studio in Surrey, which is on the west side of Greater London. I have entered a couple of art competitions and been awarded. And I've also been selected for the Saatchi Other Art Fair, which showcases emerging artists in London. That was last year. So far, it's going pretty well, investing in myself and the life that I would like for myself. So here we are today as an artist, and I'm focused on abstract and conceptual art that actually still incorporates psychology. So while I have a talent for painting portraits and still life and making things look like they should. So if I want to paint a dog, it looks like a dog. If I want to paint a person, it looks like the person. I can do all that. What I'm still very concerned with, because of my experience, is other people's suffering and the way that we hurt each other, and that we shouldn't be doing that to each other. We should be nice to each other and kind and supportive, because when we hurt each other, it can last a lifetime for some people, and some people never recover. And that concerns me a great deal, and it always touches me when I think of that about some people. So a lot of my art is encompasses the idea of the way that we treat each other and the harm that we can do to each other and the kindness that we should do for each other instead of that. So that's where I'm at with my story to date.
Wow. What's fascinating is that the art was always there, just lingering in the background of your life, forcing its way through. What was the turning point that made you make that decision to leave being a psychologist to becoming an artist?
It's going to be very, very mundane and unexciting, a bit surprising. So it wasn't like a thunderbolt moment. It was, I looked down at my hand. I think I was driving the car, and I looked down at my hand and I thought, oh, my hand isn't young anymore. I'm not young anymore. And once I realized that I'm not young anymore and that I was aging, it occurred to me, oh, well, if I'm aging, maybe one day I'm going to die. Probably, maybe I'm going to die one day is what occurred to me. I still wasn't certain about that. And once you realize that you're aging and probably going to die at some point, it really becomes apparent to you that you've got between now, this moment, and whenever that happens, to live, and maybe to live the life that you want. So I'm very privileged. I live in the West. I'm white. I'm well educated. I don't have any major disabilities. I'm really in a position to fulfill the life I want to, if I can do that. So it was a moment of vanity for me that made me realize, oh no, I'd better live the life I want instead of continuing to live the life that was the consequence of the way that I was parented. So that was my pivotal moment.
And an amazing pivotal moment too, because a lot of times we don't pay attention to the passage of time.
Mm.
And a lot of women will find out when it's too late for them to actually make that pivot and that change. So that's really inspiring that just looking down at your hand made you see the passage of time. That's pretty phenomenal. So
Yeah.
if I could take you back to the younger you, that young woman who tried this and tried that, and there could be somebody who's listening to this podcast right now, is in the same position, not sure which way to go. If you could give 3 nuggets of wisdom based on what life has taught you, what would that be? What would you have wanted somebody to have told you?
I think the first thing is to know who you are. And I don't mean in a sort of fluffy universe kind of a way. I mean really properly understand who you are as a person. And that comes from the psychology stuff. I would go online, I would recommend going online and actually looking at psychology and personality traits in particular and get some understanding about the kind of person you actually are. You're not just a sort of random collection of qualities. There are actually segments, there are actually traits, scientifically identifiable traits in people that define who we are. And the value of that is so that you can create the life that suits you. So I think women in particular really get trained by culture to create lives for others that suit them and to shape ourselves around gratifying other people. If you have a sense of who you are, you should then get a sense of the kind of life that would suit you best and work towards creating that life. The context that you find yourself in will support you to be the best version of yourself, or it can interfere with that. So don't always think it's down to you and your grit and determination to make it. If you're in a bad situation, it's very, very hard to make it. So do the best you can to know yourself, get rid of things in your situation that don't suit you, and create a situation that does suit who you are so that you can flourish. So you would do this for a child, you would do this for a plant, for goodness sake. Like if you know a plant like shade, you put it in the shade. If it likes sun, put it in the sun. Find out what suits you and put yourself in the right position to grow and flower as a person. And I say, not in a fluffy, cutesy way, like in a practical way. Go online, Google personality traits or personality tests, and do it on you and start understanding yourself. So that's number one. The second thing would be there is something that you're good at. There's definitely a talent that you have. I don't care what anyone said or what you think. You have a talent. I could find it for you if you can't find it for yourself, but you definitely do. So focus in on what your talent is. It's much easier to be successful in life at what you're already good at than trying to be good at something that you're not naturally good at. So figure out your talent. So for me, all the way through, I was doing arty things. I was making cards, painting watercolors, sewing, interior design. It was all around art, aesthetics, beauty, design, things like that. So I knew that that was my talent, and that once I'm secure, I should focus on that. So do that, figure out your talent and hit it hard, like invest everything you've got in it. Now that doesn't mean be insecure. Don't mortgage your home for it, or sell out completely. Like, be materially secure. But once you are, find your talent and hit it super hard. Give it all you've got. And the third thing would be get advice from people who know. So the world is a network. It's a network of connections and other people. Your success depends very much on being part of that network. So find people who know about what you want to be good at and learn from them. Find out where you want to go, who's there, connect with those people. So think in terms of relationships, connecting to people who can help you, learning from people who are ahead of you. Don't reinvent the wheel. Learn from people who know about what you want. Go to them, learn, and get a head start on where you want to go in life. That would be the 3 things I would recommend.
That is so practical and to the point. I love it. I love it. I love it. There's no point in trying to reinvent the wheel when the wheel's already there, right?
Mm.
And they say that success leaves clues. You do
Yes,
your research,
absolutely.
you see those role models that you can model off instead of starting from scratch.
Yeah, and get real practical things that you can do. Don't just, I mean, I loved Oprah Winfrey. She was a big influence on me in my 20s. But I don't just sort of put a poster of her on the wall and look at her. Like, listen, understand the story, extract practical things you can do, and do those things. This is not a sort of inspiring heart feeling-y thing. You have to do something if you want to get what you want to get.
Now let's take you into the future. You're now 100 years old, and you're sitting in your rocking chair, surrounded by your dogs, your cats, if you have kids and grandchildren, and you're reflecting back on your life. And this is now the younger you visiting the older you in the future at the age of 100. If you could have a conversation with that wise woman who's led you to that point, what would you say to her based on how you're living your life right now?
Are you saying that the older me is talking to the younger me, or the younger me talking to the older me?
The younger you is talking to the older you.
Giving her advice.
Just having a conversation with her. If you had the privilege of meeting the future you, with just a little thought experiment where I take you into the future, and you could meet that wise woman who's led you to that 100 years. What would you say to her based on how you're living your life right now?
I think I'd have a conversation about wishing that I'd started sooner, for sure. So I wasted a lot of time on things that weren't productive. So there was a lot of time wasted on relationships that weren't going to work, on assuming that being in love with a man was going to make everything okay, and it doesn't. So I would probably chat about the time wasted on men, the time wasted on being upset as well. So I have a tendency when I get upset to stay upset about things. And I've improved on that. I spend as little time as I can now being upset, because it takes a lot of energy away from what I would rather be doing. So when I was younger, I would take hours and days and weeks and sometimes months being upset about stuff. And it's wasted time. It didn't move me forward. So now I know that I would have a chat with the person, the older me, about the ridiculous amounts of time wasted on silly things that didn't matter, and wishing I'd done it sooner. Also, I think I talk a lot about the courage that it takes to do things, and taking bold moves. So if you don't have lots of money, or lots of connections or any particular advantage in life, you're going to have to make some bold moves on your behalf instead. So I'm sure we'd have a chat about some of the bold things that one needs to do to achieve success. Is there anything else? I think, like you said about looking down at my hand and that being life-changing, I think that having invested in myself, having invested in caring about myself is really paid off. So whether that's my appearance, with vanity, my health, my education, I think investing in me was one of the things that was useful in terms of spending time with. And I'm sure we'd have a conversation about cherishing oneself.
I love it. I love asking that question because a lot of women don't realize that we have the answers to all of our problems. And sometimes we can teleport into the future and just ask her to guide us there. What is my next step is what I do. I go into meditation and prayers if I'm struggling with anything. And sometimes I wake up and it's a clear, go and talk to Jane or John or whoever. Or I will be talking to somebody about the thing I'm working on and they'll say something and a series of little coincidences will kind of lead me down the rabbit trail. So I do believe that as women, we have all the answers to all of our problems. We can teleport into the future to find those answers.
In psychology, they call it incubation. So what you need to do is, as you said, gather information first, like talk to John and Jane and read books and watch videos. And the question that you have, get lots of information about. You need the facts first. But you know your goals, your capabilities, your reservations, your values, your mission, what you're prepared to do and what you're not.
Yeah.
And once you mold the two together, you take the information from the outside and combine it with yourself on the inside, and leave it. You incubate. You let that actually percolate in the subconscious instead of thinking. You need to give it some conscious thought too, but then you leave it alone for the subconscious to reflect on. And at some point, some response is going to come up from inside. And that's when you know what the answer is. Not the answer to the facts, but what the answer is for you.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
you need that
I love that.
to do that.
I absolutely love that. Now, the Her Story Circle is all about social impact. We focus on changing the world through our stories, our businesses, whatever it is we're doing in community. What are your social impact projects? What do you support? Where does your passion lie?
Well, I'll tell you about the series of artworks I did for the art fair. So, like I said, my concern coming out of psychology is knowing how many people in the world are wounded and continue to be wounded. Like the personal growth industry, there's what they call dysfunctional positivity, where it's all rah-rah and positive affirmations and think yourself happy and all the rest of it, which, I mean, for some people that works, but for a lot of people, they've had such a lot of damage and struggle in life that really isn't enough for them to recover, and some people are wounded forever, and those people, they matter to me. So I can't remember exactly how it came to me, but I came up with this idea for artwork that really encapsulated that. I'd been working with paper in particular and drawing, and I do remember what happened. It was this moment in the studio when I was painting a portrait probably, and I cleaned my brush. I had paint on my brush, and I cleaned the brush on a folded piece of paper that had been folded. And where the brush went over the folds on the paper, the paint caught on it in particular. So that if you looked at the piece of paper, there wasn't just color over the whole paper. The color had particularly caught on the folds in the paper. And it really, really intrigued me. It really caught my eye. I finished the painting that I was doing, and I went back to this piece of paper and I looked at it and I thought, why is this really engaging with me? Like, why is this really caught my mind's attention? And I messed around with this idea of if you fold the paper, what happens to what you put on top of it, that it catches in the folds. And I realized once I explored this, and what you do as an artist, you take an idea and you explore it, you turn it around, you turn it upside down, you investigate it, you do it lots of different ways to sort of emerge something out of it and come up with some crystallized idea that is obviously capturing some meaning that you haven't brought to the surface yet. And what I discovered was that it was this idea that when you crumple up a piece of paper, the crumples catch what you put on top of it. And what I did was a series of artwork where I took paper of various weights and colors and I crumpled them up. And then I took pastels and charcoal on my hands and I smoothed out that piece of paper with the charcoal or the pastel or whatever I had on my hands. And the crumples caught the color, and I could smooth the paper flat again, but the wrinkles and the crumples always remain no matter what you do. And I understood eventually that what that was telling me about was the crumples that some of us have subconsciously, that for many people, they've been so crumpled up, so damaged, that no matter what they do to try to smooth themselves out, sorry, I get emotional. Sorry. I get emotional just describing it. That no matter what they do, trying to smooth themselves out, although that damage will remain forever, that crumples remain forever, you know. So I did this series of pieces where I took the paper and I did this and I framed it and I took it to the art fair, and I had this series that I called First Impressions, because for some people, that's their first impression of the world. Sorry, I'm getting really emotional here. But for some people, that's their first impression of the world. Even as a baby or as a child, they're crumpled up and they never recover, you know. So I had that, I called it First Impressions, and I had that on display at the art fair. And I also had an earlier series of artwork. And there were thousands of people come through the art fair, and everybody looked at the First Impressions series. Everybody focused on that. They were absolutely fascinated, and so many people were touched. I mean, and I'm talking about an art fair where there were pretty pictures of flowers and naked women and gorgeous things. So I was in competition with artwork that was pretty and attractive and colorful, and my work was serious. And I thought, no one's going to pay attention. My stuff is boring and serious and too emotional for people. But I had people stop at my stand at the art fair and say that mine was the only work that they thought had any merit at all, that they seen all the pretty stuff and they didn't care about that. They saw mine and they thought, God, that has meaning. And I explained it to them, and people were crying like I am now. There was one young man. There was one young man who I'd had one piece of paper that was dark brown and it had black lines on it, and I taped pieces of the torn paper back together again. And he stopped and looked, and he was with his sister. And I thought that was the woman, the girl who was looking at the art, because men, maybe not so much their cup of tea, you know. And they turned around and it was him who had been looking at it. And I explained the meaning behind it to him. And he said that he had been in Afghanistan in the war. He looked at the piece of paper and he said, that's exactly how I feel inside.
Wow.
That for me was everything. Like, to have done a piece of art that someone could look at and they said, that is how I feel inside. That was, that fulfilled everything I could ever want to do as an artist,
Wow.
So that I knew then I was doing the right thing. I knew that I had done something that mattered in the world, and I sold pieces from that collection to people who understood it, that it resonated with. I sold pieces to other artists, which is a hard person to sell art to, because, they understand what art is supposed to be about,
Yeah.
But that was, I remember saying to my partner who was there with me, I said, if I die now, I'm happy. I have fulfilled the meaning of my life if someone could look at a piece of art and say that. So that for me is what I'm on a mission for, to acknowledge those people who on the inside are still struggling and hurt. And I'm planning another series of a similar nature to launch in a couple of months in London. I don't want to spoil the surprise. So if anyone is interested in a similar thing, if anyone else doesn't mind me being teary and interested in this kind of thing, maybe go to my website and sign up, because there's going to be a really surprising launch for this. But it's about this concept, but in the past. So it's got to do with God, how much do I tell you? I'm actually going to graveyards to look for material for this. So nothing bad or terrible or dodgy or anything like that. So don't worry that I'm not doing anything wrong. But it's going to be material, the same concept, but from people's history in the past and that kind of thing. So I know that this is meaningful and that it's important, and I'm on the right mission with this stuff.
I love your work. That is just incredible.
Yeah, it's on the website. Like, go to my website. You can read about the First Impression series. It means everything to me. Yeah.
We'll definitely check it out. Well, I have your website scrolling at the bottom of the screen. So if anybody's interested, please go onto Valerie's website, be inspired. If you're in London, connect with her, get information about the next exhibition, and give us some feedback, please. Valerie, thank you so much. You are the reason why I introduced the art section to our platform.
Good.
We need creativity. We need different forms of expression, different ways of telling these stories. Like you said, that young man saw his story in that piece of art.
Yeah.
Isn't that just magical?
Oh, it so is. I can't tell you how much that means to me.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Her Story Circle is attracting some phenomenal women from all over the world, each of them sharing their stories to uplift, inspire, energize. And Valerie, you certainly did that for me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Have a fantastic evening, everybody, or morning or day, wherever you are in the world. I'll be back again tomorrow with yet another inspiring guest. And bye for now. Thank you, Valerie.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making